Hey guys, welcome back to Loaf's Guide to Deadside. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into base building. This video is going to be separated into many different chapters. First, we will be covering the basics of base building with the new system that was implemented in 0.3.0. And in this first section I will be assuming that you have never even built a base before, so if you're already an experienced base builder, you might want to skip into some later chapters. So, after I'm done covering those basics, I'll talk about some of the questions that I get asked a lot when it comes to base building. Once we're finished with that, I'll be going into some of the advanced base building designs and strategies. And that will be the meat of this video. So, let's get started. Before we even get into the basics though, let's talk about what bases even do in Deadside. I get asked a lot by new players if they should even make a base, because they aren't really sure if it's important or not. So, bases in Deadside, as of update 0.3.0, have four major functions: storage, protection, use of the workbench, and use of respawn markers. First is storage, and the use there should be obvious. In your base, you can place down some storage crates, which you can store tons of loot in. This does come with the risk of being raided, however, so anything you put in your base could be taken if you do get raided. Second, we have protection. Now, depending on the server that you play on, you could use your base as cover in PvP. The community server that I run though, as well as some others, don't actually allow base combat outside of raids, so this can change depending on which server you play on. Third, we have the workbench. As of this update, all the workbench does is simply apply skins to weapons. But in the future, the workbench is going to be very important. It's where you're going to be able to disassemble and repair items. So if you're watching this video in the future when all that stuff is actually implemented, this will be a major reason to build a base. The last function are respawn markers. These simply allow you to respawn inside your base, which can be very useful if you build your base close to an area that you'd like to farm and PvP a lot. So, if any of these functions sound useful to you, then yes, you should build a base. If you're brand new, I recommend waiting until your safe zone storage is full. That way you'll still have plenty of gear in your safe zone in case your base gets raided. Building a base also requires money and resources that you just won't have in the early game. So how hard is building then? Well, if you've never built a base before, let's go over the basics. I'm going to walk you through the process step by step. However, I don't recommend you follow along in real time. I would wait until the section is finished before you actually go out and start building a base yourself, since there will be a lot of things that you will need to gather before actually going to make your base. So, the very first step in base building is placing down your land claim. And inside of that area, you and anybody else you add to the claim can build that base. Think of it kind of like a TC in Rust, except in Deadside there's no base upkeep. So, in order to build a land claim, all you need is a hammer and a saw. You will need these two tools when building anything in Deadside. Luckily, they're really easy to get. They spawn commonly around the world in construction areas, or you could just buy one from the safe zone traders for pretty cheap. Placing down your first land claim can be a difficult process, especially if it's your first time. This is because there are a few rules that dictate where you can actually place the claim down. You will need to be far enough away from other bases, far enough away from points of interest, like military bases and towns, and finally far enough away from major roads. Later in this guide, I will be covering some good base locations, but for now, since we are just covering the basics, let's assume you found a spot that you like and you've placed down your claim. So, this is the part where you actually build your base. However, you'll need a few things before you can really get started. First, you will need a code lock. Without a code lock, you won't be able to lock your base at all, so obviously you're going to need one of these. There are a few ways to get them. The one that takes the least amount of time is just to buy one from the traders at the safe zone. However, most people aren't really willing to drop 100k for one of these. That's a lot of money. The good news is, you don't actually need to buy one. What most people do instead is just craft them. In order to craft a code lock, you will need 2 batteries, 4 electronic components, 6 spare parts, and just 1 electronic repair kit. Now, this might sound like a lot, but it really isn't too bad. Just hear me out. Let's go down the list. For the batteries, these spawn everywhere on the map, and I mean everywhere. Just keep your eyes out for them because they're kind of small. The 2 lighthouses seem to be a really good place to find these. As for the 4 electronic components and the 6 spare parts, these spawn in construction and military areas, so the sawmill and bunker are a great place to find these. The electronic repair kit though is a little bit more rare, but the good news is that you only ever have to find one. The repair kit isn't actually destroyed in the crafting recipe, it stays in your inventory the whole time. They're also not that hard to track down, just look in military and construction areas, all the same places you'd be looking for spare parts and electronic components. You can also disassemble some object into spare parts and electronic components, like broken flashlights and radios. Circular saws will be turned into 2 spare parts and 1 electronic component, but they sell for 8k, so only do that if you really need the parts. Otherwise, you'll probably be better off just selling that. But alright, crafting isn't for everyone. If this sounds too tedious for you, there is one more option to get a code lock. However, it's pretty rare and very difficult. There is a small chance, and I mean very small chance, to get a code lock from either a hard or an epic mission reward crate. You should probably be trying to do these missions anyways for the really good loot that they drop, so maybe you'll just end up getting a code lock that way? Who knows? Okay, so you have your code lock. Next, you're gonna need nails. These are super cheap from the safe zone traders, so just buy a couple hundred of them. You will need nails to build the actual base structures, so make sure to get a lot. You can always just go back to the safe zone for more, or farm up some more nails yourself. They do spawn everywhere. Now, the next item you need is sheet metal. You need 2 sheet metal for each storage crate that you want to place down in your base. Each base can have up to 6 storage crates total, so you shouldn't ever need more than 12 sheet metal, unless you plan on making these towers which require a bunch. But you probably won't, so we'll just stick with 12 for now. And finally, the last thing you'll need is an axe. You need this for farming wood, obviously. Luckily, they're pretty cheap from the traders, and they're pretty easy to find almost everywhere. So, I know there's a lot of stuff I just listed off really quickly, so in front of you is a total list of items that you're going to need for a functional base. Feel free to screenshot this, or maybe write it down in a notepad so you can check off items. Also, you might notice the car battery on this list. That's for the workbench, which you will probably want as well. It's not really necessary, but in the future it will be. The car batteries spawn in all the same places as repair kits, so you should probably end up finding one anyways while looking for code lock stuff. Alrighty, so we're moving on. Let's assume you've collected all the items on this list. Great, so let's talk about actually going and building the base. First, you need to set down your land claim, so open the build menu with B. I highly recommend you have at least 1 tree that you can farm wood inside of your claim. Be sure to actually hit the tree with your axe and make sure that that tree will actually drop wood, because some of the smaller trees don't. From there, I'm just going to make an example base around this tree. Now, I highly recommend you build your base around a tree, basically encapsulate it. That way you can easily farm wood from inside the safety of your base. The tree will never fall down, and it will never run out of wood, so you can just keep hitting that one tree forever. One of the most important things to understand while building a base, though, is that each base item snaps on to another. This means that the very first thing that you place down will be what the entire base is built from. This also means that you can't destroy a structure that has another structure snapped onto it. That's kind of a little quirk with the building system. And basically what that means is that only actually build things that you want to keep. It's a huge pain to destroy large parts of your base because of the way the snapping works. You'll go to destroy one thing, but something else is snapped onto it, so it'll say object blocked. It's a whole process, so just take it slow and think out what you're doing, you know? Alright, I think that's the basics covered. Let's start to talk about some of the base design strategies that you can use to better prepare for a raid. First, we'll talk about some of the simple things that you can do, and then we'll work our way up to larger, more complicated base designs. Now, before we cover any of those specific bases though, let's talk about some general base location strategies. The actual location of your base is honestly just as important as the design of the base itself. Now, this is for a few reasons. First is that you want your base to be useful. I mean, what's the point of making a base if you never actually go to the place you built the base at to store stuff, you know? So, I highly recommend you build your base close to wherever you enjoy playing at the most. However, with that said, placing your base in a very far off location, or maybe a smart location, could make it much less likely that you'll actually lose anything to raiders. For example, if you make a base right in the center of the map, or maybe right around the harbor area, chances are tons of people are going to come to raid you. This is because many other people have bases in these areas, or it's close enough to the safe zones that players can easily go, grab explosives, and raid. Now compare that to a location like this, far off in the north. Hardly any players actually go this far north, at least as of this update. So in theory, less people will be willing to come raid you. if any people come to raid you. Of course, this comes with the trade-off of your base not being really close to any super useful locations, so it's all risk versus reward, and something to consider when placing down your base. Also, in this guide, I'm going to assume you know how raiding works. If you don't, I have a separate guide on my channel if you want a detailed explanation, but just to summarize it all real quick for you. Your base under normal conditions is completely unraidable and unlootable, with the exception of your small wooden boxes. Those can be looted. When you die, there's a 20% chance you will drop a raid token. That chance can change depending on what server you play on. 20% is the default on official servers. If a player loots the raid token off your body and activates it, your base will then be raidable. Your base is marked on the map in this large red circle, your crates become lootable, and your walls can now be destroyed with explosive charges. There's a lot more to it than that, and like I said, I have a detailed guide if that's what you're interested in, but there's a quick summary for you. Alright, I think you all have waited long enough, so let's actually start to get into some of the base designs that I have for you today. Like I said earlier, we're going from the smallest and least complicated bases to the largest and most time-consuming ones. The first base that I have for you is the stealth base. This is probably my favorite design because I usually play solo, and I don't have very much time to make a base. So the idea here is to make a very small but hidden base. You see, when you get raided, there's a very large circle around your base with a timer. This means that raiders don't exactly know the location of the raidable base, so you can take advantage of that by making your base hard to find to begin with. The ideal location for this type of base is an area with lots of foliage to cover up your base, make it more sneaky. You also probably want other bases around, hopefully larger bases, to distract from your own, and make it harder for raiders to tell which base is actually the one that's raidable. Although building next to a ton of other bases is also not a great idea for other reasons, so it's up to you. This also makes your base very easy to defend from a distance since there really isn't that much cover around. Your base is very small. You can easily set up and snipe any players that get near your base, further distracting raiders from the location of the base itself. Now if you really want, you could take this to the next level. I've seen some people do it. I don't really recommend it, but you can just place your crates down with no walls or anything and hide them in bushes. In theory, nobody can get into the crates unless there's an active raid, so it's high risk, high reward, right? Because if somebody knows the crates are there, it's very easy for them just to walk up and take everything. For that reason, I think it's best to make a design like this. It's pretty easy to defend while also being easy to construct. For players that play mostly solo, this is the type of base for you. Next, we have the kill box. This is a medium-sized base that, at its minimum, only requires one large scaffold and 4 small scaffolds, as well as some walls and ceilings. Depending on the amount of time you have, this should actually be pretty achievable by a solo player. Many different types of bases use the kill box design, and they incorporate it into larger, more complicated structures. And you'll see why in a minute, but for now, let's keep it simple. The kill box, or at least what I'm calling it, is a base design that forces raiders into a very vulnerable position. This is how it works. In the bottom floor, you have the actual kill box, in air quotes. This is your large scaffold. You want to use the one with 4 openings. You don't actually have to put any walls on this large scaffold. In fact, it's probably better that you don't at all, because the raiders will be easier to snipe. Now, above the kill box, you have your shooting floor. The shooting floor is made from the 4 small scaffolds, each placed on top of the large one. The important part here, though, is that you make your floor out of these small decks, and you should have a hole in the middle when you do this. I'll explain why in a bit. You can place your base storage in this room as well, or you can place them on another floor above the shooting floor. It's up to you and how much you want to build. Finally, place your code locked door like this. Make sure it's placed in this orientation, on the same side as the big scaffold's support structure. If you don't, you won't actually be able to get inside of your base. I know it sounds weird, but bear with me here. So how does this even work? Well, it makes more sense when I show you how you actually get inside. You need to climb up onto this support structure, then slowly walk out so that you can actually see the locked door. You should then be able to open it because you're the base owner. From there, try to get as close to the foot of the door as you can without crouching or falling off, and then spam the spacebar to climb up onto it. Alright, great, we can get inside of our own base, but what happens if we get raided? What's the point of all this? Well, this is where the magic happens. See, the raiders can't open your locked door, and they can't climb through the holes in your floor, so that means in order for raiders to get in, they will have to blow open a wall on the side of your shooting floor, or blow up one of the tiny small decks. Those are their only options. and from there they still have to actually climb in. Here's the problem for the raiders though. The only way to climb up is by getting on those same support structures, and it just so happens the holes we made in the floor can see those structures very clearly. So if any raider tries to climb up, you can just blast them. They'll be stuck in an animation. This is by far one of the most efficient ways to make a base. It's extremely defendable for the amount of time you actually spend making it. This is especially true if you have a squad that's helping you defend the base. Raiders will have a very hard time dealing with snipers while placing explosives so high up, and they will have an even harder time climbing in. Still, it's not a perfect base. A smart raid group will bring a few tools that will help them defeat this base, specifically grenades and grenade launchers. With these, a raid group can very easily grenade you out of the shooting floor. However, if you have a teammate there to help you defend, it won't be so easy for them to do that if they're getting shot at by a sniper rifle. Still, I think you guys can see why this is one of the most deadly base design concepts out there, and why you see so many other bases incorporate this sort of concept into their design. This design is also very easy to scale up for larger bases. Just build around your kill box. Make it harder to get into the kill box in the first place by placing walls and sniper towers and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much the kill box. One of the most common bases I see nowadays built by experienced players. Now, let's talk about those really absurdly large bases and sealed rooms. You see, for larger bases, the strategy is to simply make your base so big that the raiders don't have enough explosive to get inside, or at least not enough explosive to get every single one of your storage crates. When you have a base that's super large, you can have multiple different loot rooms. I always laugh when I see a really large base have all their loot in one room. They're not really making use of that space, you know? Instead, you can have multiple different loot rooms, and you can make those separate loot rooms very hard to find by, instead of just placing a door to it, seal it off with a wall. This way your loot caches look no different from the rest of your base. You can also do this by sealing the boxes in your floor, depending on if you have raised foundations. Or maybe you have a bunch of different sealed rooms in the top floor of your base. Or maybe you do both. The idea here is to have so many different loot rooms with many different indistinguishable walls between them that the raiders don't have enough explosives to unlock them all. This basically forces the raiders to start blowing up walls randomly and hoping they get to the one room that your loot is actually in. Because of this, they end up wasting a lot of explosives, and hey, maybe they'll run out. I will say though, that this strategy is a lot harder than it used to be. Because now, destroying base objects only gives half the materials back, instead of how it used to be, where you could just get the whole item. You would destroy a floor and you would get the floor back. Now you actually have to rebuild the thing. Still though, this can be very useful to take advantage of if you just want to have an emergency backup crate that you never really have to open so often. Alright, let's talk about some very specific base designs. Everything I've talked about so far could be applied to any base at any location. But what if we instead designed a base to take advantage of specific locations in the map? Enter the world of location-dependent bases. These are much harder to build, simply because there's only so many locations in the map that can be taken advantage of. Still, there's a few locations here that I think a lot of you guys don't know about. So, maybe next time the server that you play on wipes, you could rush to some of these locations and place down a base claim, so that you can actually have a unique base of your own. So, the first base here is pretty obvious, but I have to put it in the video. It's the cave base. There's only one cave in Deadside that you can build inside of. Here it is on the map. This base is notable because of how easy it is to build so many layers of doors between the outside and your storage crates. It's also very easy to defend, especially with the clever use of explosives. This base does require you to farm a lot of code locks though. However, that's about the only thing you have to farm. This base is also kind of close to the Northeast military base and the bunker, so farming these code locks shouldn't really be a problem if you're playing a lot. The hardest thing about this base is simply being the one that's lucky enough to place the claim down. Out of all the locations in Deadside, this one is by far the most popular, so if you plan on ever having this base, make sure to log on mere minutes after wipe and place down a claim as fast as you can. That's just about the only way you could ever hope to grab this base. It is immediately claimed pretty much right after the game wipes. There are more interesting locations though, for example this train. For whatever reason, the game allows you to build here, so you could build a base on top of the train. Now because of this unique unbreakable structure, I'm sure it would be very easy to make an extremely deadly kill box here. The train also spawns many good items, like gray loot crates, military weapon spawns, electronic parts. So it's a unique opportunity to actually have loot spawn inside your base. And it's the only base in the game that I can think of with this feature. If you're trying to do this in the future though, in future updates, there's a good chance this might be removed, but hey. In any case, it's just like the cave base, it's a very difficult claim to acquire in the first place, so good luck. Next we gotta talk about water bases. There are plenty of coastlines in Deadside for you to take advantage of. Basically, just apply one of the base designs we talked about earlier, either the kill box or stealth base or something else, and build it in the water. This makes it much more difficult for raiders to actually get to your base without you shooting them while they're swimming. I also know that kill boxes in the water are especially effective, since it further limits the movement of raiders. Stealth bases can also be made here. It's very easy to hide a base right in the waterline and below the shore. And because it's so low compared to the surrounding area, it's kind of hard to spot. Speaking of water, did you know you could actually build on some of the islands? There is of course the big island north of the harbor. You can place down a land claim here and pretty much build whatever you want, and any raiders dumb enough to come over, you can easily kill them while they're swimming. However, there's a lot of drawbacks to this base location. There are no trees, so building it is a huge pain. On top of that, actually going to your base to store items takes forever since you have to swim all the way over. Still though, that's the price you pay for security, I guess. No raider is dumb enough to try to raid that island base. Just like the other locations, I see this one claimed almost always on wipe day, so good luck. But there is another island that's actually closer to land. This one is much closer to trees and to land, so building and running to this base over and over again is not that much of a pain. It's also next to the highest tier loot area in the game, so late night farming at this base would be extremely profitable. However, this base does not have the same security as the other island, and people will definitely try to raid you, since they know that you probably have a ton of gear farmed up. Finally, the last location I have for you is a pretty simple one. There are plenty of locations in the south of the map and other areas that are very open, with no trees or rocks or anything for cover. You could easily take advantage of this by placing your base in the highest location in these open spots. In order for any raider to get to your base, they would have to run through a gauntlet of sniper fire. There are also some peninsulas that offer the same sort of protection by funneling raiders into large open areas. I think those are all the base locations and designs that I have in this video, but there is a very important detail that I need to stress here. No matter what base you choose, cave base, kill box, or whatever, it's all useless if you're not there to defend it. The nice thing about Deadside is that it's online only raiding, so actually show up to defend your base. So, just as important as your base design is how prepared you are to defend your base. Make sure you have ammo, healing, extra armor, everything you would need ready and available to you at a moment's notice. Without that, it'll be much easier for raiders to roll right through you. So, spend some time farming up gear and preparing for the raid, because it's most likely going to happen eventually. Buy lots of grenades. They are extremely effective if used correctly in a raid. Grenade launchers are probably the best tool for base raiding and for base defense, just because of their ability to reach around corners and kill people. If done correctly, base defense can actually be very profitable, and depending on how lucky you are, you could take all of the explosives off the raiders, activate a raid token they dropped, and go raid their base. And hey, if you do end up getting raided and you lose all your stuff in your base, just remember that hey, it's just a game. And all the items in there were going to be deleted when a wipe happens anyways, so who cares? Plus you still have all the stuff in your safe zone, so you should never be starting from square one. Anywho, I hope you guys found this video helpful. I do want to make a guide on raiding here soon, but it's going to be a while, since I actually want to do more raids first. It's one of the few things in Deadside that I don't really have hundreds of hours of experience doing. Until then, I'll hopefully have another guide out on weapons and armor here soon, maybe ballistics, or maybe even just a straight up PvP tips and guides video, you know? Anywho, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see all those videos when they come out. Thanks for watching, see you.